I'm a big believer in first lines. I think they capture the listener's attention. You know, there's nothing as great as a great first line to pull you in. I've been pretending to be somebody else since I was just 15, which I think is it's a striking statement, you know, and it's true as well. It was also in large part inspired by some of the more recent Pedro the Lion records, which deal with issues of kind of identity, male identity, growing up, adolescence, putting things away. So I started with that first line, and I wasn't really sure where it was going to go from that opening statement. And sometimes when I write, I have a very clear idea of what a song's going to be about, but in this instance, it was just kind of like almost automatic writing. It was just sort of letting it go, and the lyrical flow of the verses is very meandering and quite circuitous and circular almost. You know, there's a lot of kind of repetition of words and that kind of thing. And I kind of slightly just splurged them all out over a few days, and then I did a little bit of editing on them to tighten them up a bit, but there was something that I really liked about the kind of almost stream of consciousness nature of it, of the verses specifically, and then, you know, the chorus is sort of the central statement of the song often, and in this case. So I had these verses that I really liked, and I had the music, which started off as a finger-picking thing on a guitar and evolved over time into what it is. But it felt really strong, and it was like, I have this thing that I call the wince, which is this idea where if you write a lyric that makes you kind of go, then you should keep it in, because it means you've provoked a reaction in your first audience, which is yourself. And so I had that from the verses, and it was like, I really need the strongest possible statement about this as I can. And by this point, I've sort of realized that what I'm talking about is imposter syndrome and insecurity and all that kind of thing. And, you know, ultimately, it's a song that's about the moment when you, as a teenager, start to understand the world around you, blinking in the light, emerging into something. You know, that you start to get a sense. And some of it's political, you know. And for me, it was kind of like being at a boarding school and looking around and realizing that not everybody goes to a boarding school, and that life doesn't have to be like this, and that the opinions and received opinions of the people around me aren't necessarily the only way of thinking around the world. And then suddenly realizing that I didn't feel anything in common with that kind of worldview at all. And that's a terribly lonely thought to have as a 15-year-old or whatever. You know, it's just like, holy crap, that like I don't fit in here at all. So it kind of that was a major emotion it was tapping. It went on from there, you know, to tap in something really profound in me, which is this sense of not belonging. There's an event that happened in my life which sort of haunts this song. It's not quite in the lyrics, but like I started going to hardcore punk shows in London when I was about 15, 16 years old, which was a community of choice for me. You know, I wasn't brought up in that world. I wasn't supposed to be into that kind of music. My teachers, my parents all disapproved of me being part of this community, but it was my place of belonging. And then there was a day when some of the other kids on the scene figured out that I went to a boarding school and told me I wasn't welcome there. And it was just like, God damn it, like, can I be allowed to slot in somewhere? And, you know, that need to belong to something is not a feeling I have 24 hours a day. A lot of the time, you know, I'm proud of being the square peg in the round hole or whatever and not quite fitting in, and I think that applies to a lot of my music career. But there are other days when, you know, you do sort of wonder, where do you fit? Which genre of music history book is going to cover me? Don't know if any of them are really, because I don't fit into a neat journalistic subcategory. And so there is this kind of haunting feeling, which I first felt when I was a teenager, of just not really being part of anything that's communitarian, and really, 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 really wishing I was.
Which history book would you like to be in? What would make you happy?
I wouldn't mind being a paragraph or a footnote in a history of punk rock in the 21st century, I think. But when I started, you know, I did shows with Mumford & Sons, and I did shows with Gallows, and I did shows with, you know, like Baby Shambles, do you know what I mean? So there were these sort of scenes, and I was just sort of in the middle of all of them. And as I say, in some ways, I'm really proud of that fact. I was the kind of the guy on the edge of the photograph all the time, which I think is kind of cool in some ways, but there are also, I think it's quite a human thing to long for some kind of belonging and acceptance, and just a place where you can kind of relax for a little bit. I spend an awful lot of my life feeling like I'm on guard, and I really long for less of that, you know, moments when you can just kind of breathe out. And obviously I have that socially to a degree with my close friends or whatever, but, you know, there is a level on which sometimes I feel like whenever I'm doing an interview or I'm at a festival or something, like I'm going into battle. You know, you put on your armour and you roll up your sleeves and you take a deep breath, and that is what it is, but it's exhausting as well.
If Francis, in our thing that we made, would you agree we'd probably write the same kind of song?
I think that the hypothetical me in the video probably wouldn't be writing songs, I think is the thing. I think that would have been... I mean, I've been writing songs since I was like 13 years old. I think that in that instance, there's a sense of like, that's one of the things that's been put in the box as that sort of creative outlet. But I think that there'd be a huge regret and possibly kind of self-conscious distance. You know, I think that one of the things that the video gets across is just this idea of like, it didn't work and it hurts, and therefore I'm not touching it. Do you know what I mean? I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want my colleagues to know about it, and I kind of don't even really want my family to know about it. You know, it's this thing that is too painful to look at in the face, despite the fact that there is historical evidence in the attic. I have boxes and boxes of stuff in my attic, including the one that's in the video, which is a genuine thing. But like, there are days when I'm curious to look through them, and then there are days when I'm really not, because, you know, there are chapters of your life that you put away.
Why? Why would you not go? Or a better question, now we've opened one, would you go and we do the others?
I have started looking through some of them from time to time. During the pandemic, I was kind of bored and having a bit of a scout about. But like, it's funny because we're all slightly kind of Stalinist about our own personal history. We all frame narratives about who we are and how we got to where we are all the time, and we're retrospective editors. And there's something quite shocking sometimes about finding, because I've kept all my old letters that people sent me, flyers, photos, absolutely everything. And I started going through a box from when I was about sort of 17 or so. I found this old journal I used to keep. I've completely forgotten I ever kept a journal, and it was really unsettling, actually, because just to sort of read that perspective on the world, because there's a part of my brain that immediately remembers it, but it doesn't quite fit in some ways with the things that I've told myself about what I was like when I was 17.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. And in some ways it's quite embarrassing, because like some of it was just like, like shut up to a 17-year-old.
Why give yourself the cringe, the test with your music, but not give the 17-year-old you that same pass?
That's a good question. I think that, well, actually, this is another thing that's worth mentioning. One of the other well springs for this song, actually, was the fact that I've had a lot of conversations with my therapist, because that's the kind of 21st century type of person I am, about this kind of dissociative thing with my past selves, plural. Just in the sense that, like, there are huge chunks of my past that I remember as if it was a film I saw about somebody else, and there are many days where I just feel no connection with that at all. There's a line about that in the song, the memory seen through a window, like something I don't really own, and that sense that, like, it's just this story about a complete stranger, and in many ways that's pretty psychologically unhealthy, to be sort of like shattered into different, like, quite sort of discrete eras of my life, you know, getting into the Nambucca scene in my early 20s, the hardcore scene in my late teens, all these different periods of my life that I feel have no connection to me now and have no connection with each other. And that isn't true, actually. And one of the things about going through old boxes is it's a bit like finding the missing links in an evolutionary record. You're like, oh, here is a creature that is half mouse, half horse, or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's pretty disconcerting, the whole thing, you know. Like, I seem to have this kind of running tale with it. Like, I'm now at a point where I find the me who made Tape Deck Heart in 2013 to be kind of a stranger to myself now. Like, I don't quite understand who that person was. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And certainly, if I think about it casually, it feels like it was somebody else who did that. If I think about it in depth, obviously I can sort of piece things together. But yeah, there's a big sort of, dissociative issue there for me, and I think a lot of that comes through in this song.
Just out of interest, right? You want some more? I think you good?
No, I'm good.
if there's been different Frank Turner costumes since you were a kid. Looking back on any of them, are you like, that's closer to who I am? Did you accidentally stumble into yourself on the way?
That's a very good and very profound question. It's starting to get to a point now where there are eras of my past that I can look back on with a degree of pride. And actually, Million Dead specifically is kind of cool for me. Not all of it. Some of the early demos were pretty naff in their way, but like the debut album is a good record, and I listened to it on the 20th anniversary. It was released the other day and was so moved by it. I actually got one of the lyrics tattooed on my chest, which we then covered up for the video. You know, because the other thing is that, like, you know, it's easy for a 17-year-old to be disdainful about being 15, or for a 25-year-old to be disdainful about being 20, or a 30-year-old to be about 25, and so on and so on and so on. But at 42, I know what 22-year-olds are like, in the sense of I know that they're young people, and that's not who I am now, and therefore there's a degree of distance there that's actually good. It's quite, there's a possibility for objectivity in there, and like listening back to that first Million Dead record and all that, it's kind of like, wow, yeah, that's a good record. That's a weird record. It's a lyrically dense and strange piece of art. I think it doesn't really sound like anybody else who was around at the time, in a way that I'm super proud of, because I thought that at the time, but who knows, when you're in the thick of it, you can't objectively judge that about your own art. But listening back now, I'm like, we didn't sound like the bands that we toured with or that we were associated with all the respect in the world for those bands, Funeral for a Friend, 100 Reasons, whoever else. But we were our own thing. We were a weird little band. And yeah, so there's a part of me that's like, good for you, 22-year-old me. Like, you did something original, I think. And of course everybody else in the band. I don't want to claim all the credit. But yeah, so there is some sort of affection there for me, between me and that version of myself.
Over the arc then, if it's always just been leaning towards yearning for something that you don't have, why do you think there's kind of not been an acceptance of that, of just that's who you are? Like, if you walk with a limp all your life,
yeah,
hopefully by this age you'd be like, I've just got a limp.
Sure. I think that that's, again, a very profound question. I think that the first thing is that there's this kind of point of shattering for me in my sense of identity in my past, which comes simply from the fact that my chosen life is so radically different from what was expected of me, my family background, all that kind of thing. And in many ways that's kind of the essence of the idea of punk rock, in a way, as in an identity of choice rather than of inheritance, you know. But it's still pretty radical. I mean, I went to a family party the other day and just felt like an alien, and I'm 42, do you know what I mean? But like, I still get cousins saying, "Do you still doing your music?" And it's like, I will kill you. So, you know, there is that sort of disjointedness, and it's funny because I have friends who really, really don't have that, you know. It's not that I don't get along with my parents, but it's just the world I inhabit is, I might as well live on the moon as far as they're concerned still, you know. So that, I think, it is right at the heart of my inability to feel settled, shall we say, because you get pulled in different directions in life by different things, you know. But also, I mean, there is a sense in which I wonder whether being content in my sense of myself and my identity would be healthy for my creativity. Most of the creative people I know, not all, but most of the creative people I know have something unsettled inside of them, have a sense that something doesn't quite fit together properly, and then there's a question that they're trying to answer on some really deep level. And I think that that's kind of where good art comes from. I'm going to be cheesy and quote Leonard Cohen, but there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in, you know? It's like, I mean, I'm slightly skeptical of the whole, like, you have to be sad to write good songs. That's not quite what I'm saying. But the idea of being content with my lot doesn't feel like a place that I'm likely to get to. Certainly historically, it's never been the case. So, but also, I don't know whether that's whether that would be actually really something I want in life in some ways, because I really like songwriting.
Get a bit morbid for one fucking second, because it's not like us. If you're hypothetically at the end of your life as an old man, will you look back at all of that being unhappy as a life wasted?
I wouldn't use the word unhappy. Like unsettled, I think is the word.
Does that not
use.
freak you out though?
Yes and no, but again, and this gets quite circular in a way, because the fact of being slightly unsettled about being unsettled, we've got very meta now, is sort of part of it in a way, you know. But I just I think about the fact that Townes Van Zandt was asked, how do you be a songwriter? And he said, you have to arrange your life in such a way that you could leave in half an hour and live your life in such a way that occasionally you need to. And I think that that's beautiful, and I love that. And like, I'm old enough now to sit here and say there is no part of me that disrespects the idea of looking for comfort and settlement and 3 kids and 2 cars and drive and all whatever else it might be. If that's what makes people happy, then I think they should pursue that and enjoy it. But I just there's a sense in which I'm not looking to get fixed. You know, I don't want to be ironed out completely. There is a spin cycle of extreme self-confidence and extreme self-doubt that goes to the creative process in many ways. But there are, and the bit when I'm on stage and people are cheering or whatever is generally speaking 2 hours out of 24, 4 days a week. Well, 4 days in a row, 1 day off, generally speaking. In my normal touring life, which is roughly 9 months of the year. So all the rest of the time, you're not doing that. You're sat in a dressing room, you're sat in a cheap hotel or whatever it might, or lying in a cramped bunk on a tour bus. And it's surprising how quickly that kind of adulative glow fades. Do you know what I mean? And you just feel like another dickhead. And yeah, so you do get that imposter syndrome. You do be like, what am I doing? And why is anybody paying attention to what I do? You know? I did a secret set at a festival the other day, and I was really, really genuinely convinced that no one was going to come because it hadn't been announced. And people did come, and I was really sort of blown away by it. And my tour manager just sort of said to me, like, what is wrong with you? Of course people are here. You've done X, Y, Z, this. And people are excited that you're here. I mean, they self-evidently are, but it's like I don't think that about myself on a day-to-day basis.
What is the exact inner monologue you've got at that moment? What are you telling yourself?
Oh, I'm telling myself that some people cared 10 years ago about what I do, but they probably don't anymore. They probably don't go to festivals anymore. They probably got kids. They probably didn't like my last 2 albums. They probably don't care. I was on the radio for a bit, and I've stopped on the radio, so I'm not cool anymore. Mm-hmm. If I ever was, you know, this like, there's going to be, I know there'll be some kind of diehards at the front, which I'm always grateful for, don't get me wrong, but it's like, broadly speaking, like, you know, I'm not part of the cultural mainstream. It's not relevant. No one's really going to give a shit.
You don't think so?
I definitely don't think I'm part of the cultural mainstream at all.
I mean, like, culture's so fucking... I mean, like, you're not Dua Lipa, but everyone kind of knows who you are. That's picked up
yeah, sure. I mean, but then it's funny that you say that, because I don't...
You don't know who... Yeah,
I don't believe that emotionally. I really don't. Like, it's funny, sometimes I meet people who don't know anything about the music I make, and I get introduced to musicians, and they say, oh, I'm terribly sorry, I don't know who you are. And I'm like, why would you? Like... I mean, and I sort of started saying that years ago as a slightly kind of, it's a nice way of breaking the ice kind of thing, but I do also kind of mean it. It's like, I don't really know how people come across my music, and I don't really know why they keep listening to it. I mean, that sounds mad, but it's true. And I think that there's just that inbuilt self-protective pessimism, you know? Like... Because what you don't want to do is be that guy who used to be famous, who's then chewing the carpet and pounding his fists on the stage because not enough people came to his reunion tour or whatever. It's just undignified. But it is also tapping into a real deeper emotion, which is that I don't have much in the way of confidence about the merit of what I do, or like how many people should or do care.
Yeah, it seems like you kind of care for the right. Like, I don't ever imagine you being that guy of being like, I used to be.
Yeah.
You're like, when you stop asking for fucking autographs, it's like, I don't think you.
Yeah. On the day when people stop asking me for autographs, I'm probably going to be like, well, I knew it was coming.
Yeah, you'll be like, I was right all along.
Well,
After,
yeah,
like,
yeah, totally. But it is. I mean, but this is actually really important stuff. I think that we're talking about here, like
podcast.
Yeah. But it's like, I do not inherently, really, in the depths of my soul, believe that what I do is going to appeal to that many people, I guess. Or indeed any on some days.
Let me just ask you then, right? Because that's a fucking ridiculous statement, right? What would have to happen for that guy to shut the fuck up? What do you need, Frank? What do you want?
Well, that's a question that I've been trying to answer for a long time, and in many ways quite a lot of the album Undefeated is kind of trying to look at that question in the face. What would it take for me to just like accept who I am and where I've got in life?
Kind of like the Simpsons thing that Homer gets to the fucking top of the mountain, there's another mountain at the top.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about every milestone I get to in my life.
Sure.
But there'll be some things that in my life, if I achieved them, I'd be like, well, I've got that.
Yeah, but so that now we go to Kurt Cobain, right? And this is the song Serve the Servants is such a brilliant song because it's based on Patrick Süskind's novel Perfume, and it's about the idea of somebody who gets everything they wanted and realizes they didn't really want it after all, which was a profound thing for him to write a song about, I think. But there are so many things on my school card, CV, however you want to put it, that should have put this to bed a long time ago. I've headlined arenas and sold them out. I've opened for Bruce Springsteen. I've played at the Olympic opening ceremony. I mean, there is always another hill to climb, and to some degree what we're talking about here is just kind of ambition, which I think in small doses is a healthy component of the creative mind. You have to be hungry on some level. But this is the thing, whenever something like that happens, there's this part of my brain that just goes, yeah, it doesn't matter that much. Like, we opened for Springsteen at Hyde Park, and then we had an incredible show, and I walked to a stage and went, yeah, it doesn't matter that much. I mean, I walked to a stage when we headlined Wembley Arena in 2012, we sold 12,000 tickets and sold out an arena, and no one thought I could do it, and I fucking did. And then I walked to a stage and ended up ducking out my own after party because I couldn't really be asked. I found my crew were having an after party, and I went and got drunk with them instead. Again, there's this sort of dichotomy between, like, obviously a huge part of me wants to be the centre of the attention, otherwise I wouldn't be the singer in a fucking band, prancing around on the stage and putting out records and doing interviews and making music videos and all the rest of it. But I'm quite sort of nervous and embarrassed about that kind of inherent egotism a lot of the time when I'm not actually on a stage. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't really want to be the centre of attention at a party very much. That's everything we're talking about here, this imposter syndrome thing. It's a bit kind of like, I stand at an after party for a headline show and I'm a bit like, I'm not entirely sure why everybody wants to talk to me. On some level, I'm aware that that's ridiculous. I'm aware that that's quite a sort of like primal emotion. Do you know what I mean? It's quite Jungian in this way.
Big time.
But it is there, And I guess this is the thing. I am also aware that nobody thinks that I would feel like that. Who doesn't know me? Do you know what I mean?
That's interesting. I never thought about that. So are you kind of almost have to play that down a little bit of being like...
Yeah,
are you just telling me the story I want to hear right now?
We're getting into...
I know, man.
Wheels within wheels here. But everybody thinks that... Not everybody. People who are big fans of my music, people who don't know me that well, can sometimes be quite sort of surprised, or if not shocked, if I talk about imposter syndrome as an idea. But it's like one of the governing emotions of my life, just this idea that I'm not entirely sure why anyone comes to my shows, and people look at me like I'm talking out my arse, but it's in there. It's not the only thing, but this is a song about that thing.
That's it, dude. We're going.
Great. Cool.
Well,
Happy?
yeah, man. Like,